Hi bookworms, we're taking a moment ahead of this episode to bring your attention to Librarians and Archivists with Palestine. For years, this organisation has been working to defend Palestinian libraries and archival institutions and fighting against attempts to erase or misrepresent Palestinian culture. With the genocide of the Palestinian people ongoing, LAP are doing vital work to distribute free resources, to report on the irreversible damage Israel is wreaking on Palestinian universities, museums and other cultural sites, and to platform Palestinian voices. If you'd like to find out more about LAP or support their work, visit librarianswithpalestine.org or follow the link in our show notes. Free Palestine, and thank you for listening.
Welcome to the Hidden Bookcase. Come through and get cozy. Pick a book, your favourite book. That's the one that opens this room. Inside you'll find a warm fire, a loving cat, and a wide skylight to the stars.
And a dangerously high to be red pile.
I'm Morgan, I use they them pronouns, and I am a tortoise full of drugs.
I'm Soren, I use he him pronouns, and I am acute hypothermia.
We've been friends for over a decade and are always swapping books.
Each episode, we take it in turns to recommend one another a favourite read. The first time reader tells us what they know about the book, makes some predictions about what they don't, and then we discuss our thoughts with all of you bookworms. This summer, we're reading about sapphics in space.
So today let's get to talking about
Frontier by Grace Curtis. So Morgan.
Yes.
This is a Morgan recommendation. How did you find out about this book?
That is a great question. It was in the summer of 2022 when I first got NetGalley. And I think I must have just stumbled across it on there and gone, that sounds good. I'll request it on the off chance I get it. And then I did. And I think that must have been it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you remember what drew you to it?
I mean, the cover. Look at that cover. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. It is beautiful.
It has a Tamsyn workout on the front, which always helps.
Definitely.
Because this was in my, I think I had just read Harrow for the first time that summer, which feels insane that it was only less than 2 years ago. But yeah.
And can you tell us what Frontier is about?
I can. Frontier is about a woman making her way across a desolate Earth to find her partner again after they crash on a spaceship. Nice and succinct. There you go.
Very succinct. Beautiful.
Yeah. And it's gay.
It's gay.
And it's space western. And it's dystopia. And it's eco-fiction. It's all of the good things.
I don't think I was expecting the eco-fiction. I can't remember what I was expecting now.
Should we listen to your blind to find out?
Let's listen to my blind. I'm very excited to be reading Frontier by Grace Curtis. I was lucky enough to get my hands on an arc of Space Hotel, so I actually read that one first, even though Frontier is Grace Curtis's debut, and I really loved the very whimsical voice and the empathetic approach to her writing, and she very much broke the form there, so I'm very excited to see how Frontier also breaks writing rules, in inverted commas. I know from Morgan recommending the book on the show that we have an unnamed protagonist who gets referred to as a different title in each chapter, I think, like the Wanderer or the Pilot or something. I'm not sure if either of those are actual examples, but I think it's like that kind of thing. And I think she's crash landed maybe on her home planet. I'm assuming it's a woman because this is sapphics in space, so I'm using she, her, but I'm not sure if that's true. And I think she's trying to get back to her partner. I'm pretty sure that's where the sapphicness comes in. So I'm going to come up with a wild prediction because that's pretty much everything I know. Frontier. I'm going to go with Wild West because it's called Frontier. I think that's going to be sort of the genre blend here. I think maybe we're going to get some spaghetti western type vibes, maybe some sheriffs, maybe some nods to that genre. I think that'd be fun.
There you go.
There you go. I feel like I need to state for people who are like, that's not a wild prediction. We don't usually read the blurbs on the show. So I know that most people would be like, well, obviously, but I didn't know that. So I was just basing that off the title. That was all I had to work on.
Pretty good.
So don't draw and quarter me and be like, that wasn't wild enough.
Yeah, I mean, it has a nameless protagonist until the 3/4 mark.
Until she gets a name.
Although I will admit, I did not remember what the protagonist's name was. I was like, yeah, I know you find out. Don't know what it is.
I will say, introducing her name and then introducing another character who is her name but one letter off, like a page later, did throw me off slightly. I was like, hang on, which one? And then I was like, okay, no, not that one. It's just a strange thing. I feel like most people would be like, unless you have a really deep significance to this random NPC's name for Ken, why are you keeping it? Although I did like that his name was Ken.
I think because I listened to the audiobook of this, that didn't process for me, because I was like, Ken and Kay are very different names. Just no awareness for that. Fair. I haven't actually ever read the book physically. because the audiobook is so good. Like, the narrator is very sort of like, her accent work with the Western accents is very fun, very vibey.
This already makes me want to listen to it.
It's good. I can recommend.
I was imagining Southern accents, but I was like, my brain's not doing it justice. I'm not that good at them.
Yeah.
As Morgan knows from being in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with me.
I think we share this. Don't worry.
Yes.
Let's talk about the cover. We do that a lot.
Let's talk about the cover. It's beautiful.
The purples with like the sort of the browns. This is definitely one of those books where the cover pops. Like, it really does.
To be fair, I didn't realise that we were on Earth because of the cover. I thought because of the redness, which obviously is just a post-climate disaster Earth in this situation.
I think I remember seeing it as a thumbnail on NetGalley and being like, the pod on the side looks like a keeled over Among Us character, and my brain just had this lodged in somehow. It's all I could see. Because there's not so much like detail on like a thumbnail because it's quite small. So I just was just like, yeah, sure, probably something to do with Among Us, I guess. Aliens? No.
Speaking of the pod, can we talk about that opening scene with the trio who find it? I love it so much.
Honestly, it really sets the scene of like, oh, who's our protagonist going to be? Are they going to meet? No, they are the first 5 minutes of Supernatural, is what they are.
Exactly. I think Curtis, she does this really well in Space Hotel as well, but she's really good at balancing a dark tone with a humorous tone without making either seem wrong. Like, it doesn't seem like, oh, this is a bit kind of inappropriate to joke about, and it also doesn't seem like the humour is cheapening the darkness. It's good.
Do you mean Floating Hotel?
I do. What did I call it?
You call it Space Hotel.
I called it Space Hotel.
In your blind as well.
I called it Space Hotel in the blind. Well, we're going to have to leave this in now to establish that I don't know the name of the book that I've read. It is a hotel in space, in my defence.
Yes, this is true.
It's Sapphics in Space Month, what can I say? And I've got to point out, these Sapphics were in space when they became Sapphic with each other.
That's a very interesting way of saying they did the deed.
I meant like fell in love.
New euphemism just dropped.
I just wanted to point this out because this is mostly set on Earth. I'm just saying.
Yes.
I think it should still fit the theme.
Yes. No, they are Sapphic in space and on Earth. Double. How exciting. Did
you think that this was going to have an unhappy ending? Because, and I don't want to spoil Floating Hotel, but because of the similar tone to Floating Hotel, I didn't know here. So I was kind of like 50-50 when they were like, Noelle's dead. I was like, maybe she is dead.
I'm not sure. I feel like the way the tone is, I feel like I could have seen Noelle being dead, but that it's still having a somewhat happy ending.
Yeah,
like,
no, I know what you mean.
Perpetuating Noelle's dream on Earth for her or something like that. Like, I expected it to have a hopeful ending.
Yeah.
Even if Noelle was dead.
Even if it was bittersweet, but still a little bit of, yeah.
I think that's where I was at with that.
I just quite enjoyed not being, like, foregone conclusion, obviously Noelle is fine. I was quite enjoying genuinely being in the dark about it. And then also the loop back to, Sewell mentioned her specifically. He mentioned details about the crash. That was fun. I didn't pick up on it either.
It's the good foreshadowing.
Very nice, very nice.
Now, I love the ending. I love how sort of like chill. It's very... This whole book is very... I think because I read it at the same time as I just finished Alice Isn't Dead, which for listeners is a podcast about a trucker trying to find her wife. I will say no more because any more is a spoiler.
Driving mostly across the desert. And I feel like in my brain, the trope of I must find my wife originated with Alice Isn't Dead. I feel like it did establish it in the podcast genre.
Definitely at least in the podcast genre. Yeah.
We've got a lot of wives. They keep just disappearing.
You got to have a reason to make a podcast, you know? It's just a vibe. It felt very nostalgic because of that theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like we are going to see more like podcast heavy themes or like popular podcast tropes beginning to perpetuate in published fiction. I feel like we're beginning to see that. And there may be that there's absolutely no correlation, but my brain is noticing it.
There might be some inspiration. I was also thinking about podcasts weirdly when reading this, like when I was thinking about recommendations for the end of this. my brain was going to podcasts. I really loved this. I love all of the character voices so much, and I love the way that Curtis writes characters. To be fair, I feel like I went in with very high expectations because I did really love Floating Hotel. And then especially when this was shaping up to be similar, but there's no protagonist really of Floating Hotel. The lens just changes from character to character. And then they arguably all come together at the end. But you don't spend more than a chapter with a person, which is kind of similar to here, except you have the through line of Kay. But I think she had that skill, like she perfected it. Like you care about characters even if they only come in for a little tiny little moment.
She's so good at hooking you into a single character point of view in like a page. Or like, oh yeah, Hattie, I'm like, I would ride or die for you within like 2 sentences.
Exactly. I feel like she often does it in one line. I feel like it must be such a challenge from a writing point of view because you are giving yourself that challenge over and over again of like, you need to get the reader invested in this character. And usually you have to do that in your first chapter. So that's why you spend ages polishing the first chapter over and over again and making sure the first line is beautiful. But you're doing that every 5 seconds.
And it feels like every single chapter is like a different plot, like its own potted plot. You've got the murder mystery on a train, and you've got the like weird town, and you've got like, it feels like we're jumping genres, but we're all going through a through line. Very
much like a homage to lots of different genres, which was fun. You do have that murder mystery, which is specifically a murder mystery on a train, and it's a locked room thing, and you have the lights going out, which is very mired in the genre conventions. And then you have the weird cult in the innards of a machine. Is that a trope? I feel like it is, but maybe I'm just weird brood fiction.
No, I feel like it's a trope. I've definitely seen it a lot.
You know, the cult that lives in the machine. We've all seen it.
Also, as somebody who has watched Firefly and watched it at a very formative age, I was feeling very nostalgic for that.
I somehow still have not seen Firefly. I need to get on that.
You've got to see Firefly, Thorin. Like,
really?
Ignoring the fact that it's by Joss Whedon, it is a good show. Is it a good thing that it was cancelled after 1 season? Realistically, actually, when you look at his plans for the rest of the show, yes.
Oh.
However, it was also done dirty by them just randomly remixing the order of the episodes.
Oh yeah, that's a really strange thing to do.
Yeah. But I remember being 17, or maybe even 16, on like Christmas Day. My mum bought a Netflix subscription for Christmas, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and eventually I stood up, having finished the show. Also, the tagline, Love, Loss, Laser Guns. I feel like it doesn't give what I was expecting it to give.
Yeah, I feel like laser guns implies very high action to me. Whereas I feel like this is a lot more contemplative, character-driven.
Which I love.
Yeah, I also adore it. I wonder if it put people off. I feel like this doesn't have a super high rating on Goodreads, having sort of perused. I've seen a lot of people say that they wanted to like it, but they didn't like it, and I wonder if that... I feel like the sci-fi audience, some aspects of the sci-fi audience really want specific things in terms of like hard sci-fi or in terms of high-octane action, and it's definitely not giving those things.
No, it's giving everything I want from sci-fi, personally. Same. As somebody who was raised on Becky Chambers.
Exactly. It's very reminiscent of Becky Chambers. And I love the subtle world building as well. Like all of the little things that you get about how Earth has changed in the wake of the Exodus. And the little things that you learn about space. I think this is set in the same universe as Floating Hotel. Haven't read Floating Hotel super recently, so I would be shaky on it. But based on the fact that there's an empire that gets vaguely mentioned and colonies in space and like a clear messed up hierarchy, and no one really references Earth in Floating Hotel, that makes me think that it is the same setting. Also, there's not actually aliens in Floating Hotel in the same way that there aren't really aliens in this, unless you count people who have left Earth as aliens. But gosh, even just like the swears being like hell above and heaven below.
Yeah. God below. God hold you down. I love that one.
The concept of gravity being like Gaia's embrace, very fun.
Yes. So I love up religious world building. Like I feel like I have that niche on this podcast now. That's my bread and butter. That's my jam. I love it.
The Preacher's Son chapter was one of my favorite ones. It was just so good. She did a child voice so well for that as well.
Yeah. He's 10.
He's 10.
He's old enough to know the forbidden secrets.
He is. You got to tell him.
It's so good. And I feel like that's a good segue to talk about the similarities to Gideon the Ninth, because when do we not compare Gideon on this podcast? But then also we're justified because Tamsyn Muir has talked about this book.
That's true.
And quoted on it. Spoilers for The Locked Tomb, everybody. But treating the Earth as a deity, post-apocalypse eco-fiction where you like return to Earth. I don't know what it is, but it's so... I love this genre It's such a hyper niche.
It's so good. I really liked the dichotomy as well between the fanaticism approach of people being like, oh, this ship crashed because Gaia said so, and actually she was dragging you back, and also even these children that fled the climate emergency are sinners, versus Noelle's very practical approach of like, well, I guess she has a little bit of romanticism in there where she's like, if I fix Earth, the effect will ripple out and fix all of space. But, you know, you can kind of see where she's coming from in terms of getting to the source of the problem.
Yeah.
But she has the practical approach of like, let's go down there and give aid. And then even though she's working for people who she doesn't agree with later, she's like, I'm still going to do this because it'll help the people around me. And even I'll stay, despite the fact that I'm putting myself in danger.
And you have the cool thing as well of like Amber, who originally is just like mindlessly like, oh, you're from space, get away. Versus you meet her like a few months later and she's done her reading and she's sort of thought about it critically. And it's like, I still believe in a god. I believe in God. I don't believe in organized religion. You know, that nice little...
That little bit of character development from Amber. Lovely.
Yes. You know, she's one of the only NPCs that doesn't die. We love that for her.
So many people die. A lot of people die.
I was so sad about Hattie. I loved her.
Honestly, that one was brutal.
She's so judgmental and so perceptive, and I love her dearly. And now she's dead. And she dies in that guy's point of view. So you don't even get like any justice for her. You just get him being a horrible, horrible, horrible little man.
Also, that random guy with the bike. I don't know why that made me sad. But the one who was like, you'll be fine if you get on the road. Just get on the road by yourself. And then Kay finds his corpse with his bike and is like, oh.
Whoops. Oh, dear.
He's just doing his best. We don't even know anything about this guy. But still.
Pull one out.
This random dude.
One thing I really noticed was that, like, because I've been thinking a lot recently in my own writing about the difference between YA and adults and how much to explain and how much to trust the reader. And because I'm incapable of trusting the reader, because I'm always like, but what if they miss something? So I'm always like, I'll over-explain just in case, which is, you know, the autism talking. But so I'm reading a lot of like adult books and going, what have you not explained? What have you explained? And there were like tiny little bits where I was like, this is adult. This is like firmly adult. It's not telling the reader everything. There was this one moment in the library when Amber and Kay are like facing off, and it's talking about how you don't know where the bullet's gone, but you know there was something shot, and then Amber looks at the like end of her gun and it's melted.
Yes, yeah.
There's no line underneath that's like she had shot straight through or something like that.
Yeah,
which I'm so used to like having explained. It's just that's where that description ends, and you know, oh, it's because she's like a really good marksman. And it never tells you that Kay's like the perfect marksman. It's just shown to you in the text. And I feel like that was done really skillfully.
Yeah. And that's so much more effective for that absence. Like it just gives her that air of sort of mysterious, cool space captain who has blown through this town.
Yeah.
That's very Han Solo, as she deserves. And also I think in a similar vein you don't get, oh, I miss Noelle so much and I love her for these reasons, etc., etc. Like you get very, very little of Kay thinking about Noelle, particularly at the beginning. And I think that absence makes her yearning for her like far more effective because you're just getting these little hints. So there is an absence rather than a, hey, you're getting constant flashbacks and you're hearing about Noelle constantly. So you as the reader, for you, she's practically there. Because she's not there and because you're just getting tiny, tiny little things. You don't get her name for ages and ages. You basically just get Kay's decisions being filtered through the lens of how would Noelle react to this when they're intense. Like when she wants to kick the tortoise, I think. And then it's like, I'm not going to do that because Noelle wouldn't want me to do that.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to the whole tortoise situation because I really did love that. That was so funny. Every aspect of it. Also, the genius of setting him up as a character without establishing that he's a tortoise and then circling back when you know he's a tortoise. And you're like, okay. Because you open the chapter and you're like, who is this guy? And then you're like, oh, okay.
And trying to figure out what kind of creature he is for ages, being like, green, humpback, maybe tortoise, maybe tortoise.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I don't think you ever actually get. Oh no, she does remember the word at some point, doesn't she? But it's late in the game, so that's another thing where you're just trusting the reader to figure it out when you do. And honestly, I think you can have a fun reading experience if you figure out early on and go, oh, I was right. And then you can have a fun experience if you don't realize at the end. You go, oh, of course. Just not hand holding the reader has so much utility. Like it's just fun.
God, I wish I could learn how to do that. Who is your favourite character?
It's really hard in this book because there's so many to choose from, and I love everyone so much, apart from Seawolf, that guy. But I think he is a good villain.
The way the narrator voices him is really soft-spoken, and almost
Ooh.
like what you would typically expect a narrator to do for a feminine voice, which I really liked. It was very sort of like breathy, which was really fun. Also, on the topic of the narrator for a second, the way that she pronounces things is really interesting. For example, Ramirez, in her narration, she'll say Ramirez, but then in people's character voices, she'll say Ramirez, which is just a really fun sort of like lilt on the accent, which I love.
I like that.
I love narrators who do cool things. It's not just reading the book word for word.
And I think you have to have a very talented narrator for something like this, where you have so many characters and you want to keep them all feeling fresh, and then you come back to a few, so you want to recognize them when you are back to them.
Yes. Oh, so good. So, your favorite character?
That's a great question, which I've avoided so far. Feels like cheating to say Kay. You do get to stick with her the whole time, and she's so much fun, and I do love that trope of, like, character who has done horrible things and is trying to grow from it. And particularly, I think she's a very sympathetic portrayal of that as somebody who was, like, in the military as a child. She's like a child soldier. Like, she didn't know what she was doing for much of that, and then she was indoctrinated into that way of thinking. So her coming out of it is very, like, okay. Like, it's an easy redemption arc in some ways, but I think that works for this because you don't need her to be super edgy and having to fight murderous impulses constantly. Like, she has a couple of them.
Just a couple.
Not all the time. But, you know, I have to give a shout out to Hattie as well, because she was so much fun.
Possibly my favourite character, I think.
Yeah.
She has such a way about her that makes her so singular as a narrator.
Yeah.
Like, you come into her brain for 5 minutes and she just completely reframes the whole situation. And just, like, the way her brain works was really fun to be inside. And she just doesn't give a She's like, yeah, I know I'm good. I like my trashy romance novels and I dress well. Nobody else does. Slay. Also, like, I have not done much with, like, the Western genre in general. But when I went to the Edinburgh Fringe, when I first went there when I was 18, I saw Showstopper, the improv musical. And the musical that they did when I was there was a Western set at a hat shop. And so I was just visualizing the woman from that for the whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, I recognize this vibe. So that definitely helped make me like her more. But Kay was a really good main character.
Yeah.
I feel like because you do get her from an outside perspective, she doesn't fall into the trope of, I'm in the main character's head, they don't really have a personality. I feel like we got a lot of it because we're getting it from so many different points of view. And
you get her dynamics with so many different people as well. Like, you get her with the preacher's son, and you're like, oh, this is cute. Like, she's so protective. And then also a similarly kind of protective vibe with Ava, where she's, like, kind of guarding her through.
I loved all the female characters in this. Ava, Amber, they were all different, but they had really good dynamics. And they all felt very human.
Yeah, they are allowed to be interesting, which sounds like a low bar.
Yes. I feel like we don't talk much about, like, sci-fi compared to fantasy on the show. But I feel like sci-fi is even more behind on female character diversity than fantasy is, because fantasy has gotten picked up by the romance girlies and the romance genre in general. So it is skewing more and more towards the female gaze. Whereas I feel like sci-fi is 1 or 2 steps behind.
Yeah, it's still more male-dominated, I feel like.
Yeah, this is a good benchmark of the more, like, the sci-fi I want to see. Like, after Becky Chambers and stuff like that. I feel like also that sort of thing of having multiple different main characters who are all viewing the same event differently. I saw first in A Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers.
Oh, yeah, that does it so beautifully.
Yeah.
Circling back to the fact that this has a lot of characters who all feel like they have a lot of depth. I think Curtis is really good at invoking that by just giving you little suggestions of things. Like with Hattie, considering that we're talking about her because we love her, you get the fact that she's on the way back from her mother's funeral. You don't get, like, how she died or really what their relationship was like. You do get the fact that Hattie feels like she hasn't processed it yet. And that's kind of all. And I just really like that. Kay is the main character in inverted commas, but it doesn't really feel like this is just her story. Like, you are just stepping into other people's stories all the time.
Feels like a fully developed world. I want to see what the writing process for this was like. I want to see the insane mind map or the 500-page Google Doc.
Yeah.
I feel like there's got to be mad notes.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, especially if Floating Hotel is set in the same world. I'd be interested to see if there's, like, a master doc, which is, like, sprawling with world building, and then we'll get slowly more and more bits, and then eventually we'll get a Becky Chambers situation where you'll get a reference to this, and you'll be like, I know that.
Yeah.
I recognise, oh my God, that's the captain from book 1. But we're seeing her from a completely different perspective, where she's, like, a terrifying war hero.
Yeah, Floating Hotel does the same thing as well. I don't remember if there's a name for the technique, but when you have little bits of in-universe text that support the story. which I really love, which I'm now trying to, in my brain, I'm like, is there a connection? Did she maybe drop the same name of like a scientist who was writing a paper or something? But also, I can't remember. I read Floating Hotel like 6 months ago. So there's no way. If anyone's listening to this and has read them back to back and they're like, no, I spotted it, please tell us.
I feel like it's definitely an emerging thing in fantasy and in sci-fi to do that. And I feel like it just rounds out worlds so much more. And people can say like, oh, it's lazy world building because you're not putting it in the text. But it just gives you these little snapshots that makes it so much more real. And I love it. It's my favourite thing. I
love the sneaky fact that we hear from Noelle early in this because we don't know it's her yet. And then we get that essay where everyone else is like, what's wrong with you?
The specifically academia articles I love. I think in A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, all of the excerpts are little like papers that people have been writing about literature that the character is obsessed with in universe. Petty academia drama is already funny in real life when you're reading papers. So when you get fictional petty academia drama,
yes,
I eat that up. I do feel like that's another thing that Becky Chambers definitely was on the forefront of doing, because I don't feel like I saw it beforehand, because she gives you whole excerpts of in-universe world building in the actual chapters.
Yeah, Record of a Spaceborn Few also specifically does the academia thing a lot, where you have papers on like xenobiology and stuff.
And it's just such a good way of doing things, because it means you don't have to like try and info dump, because you're like, okay, here is the section for info dumping. I'm not trying to shove it into the prose. I'm giving you a little separate section so people can't complain about world building being janky.
It's not just a character spouting the information that you need to know, which does kind of break your immersion. It's interesting because I feel like it wouldn't really work very well. I think it would work well in an audio drama format if you just had like a little recording that was like an in-universe thing. Arguably you do something similar with season 2 of the Attic Monologues, Morgan, actually, now that I think about it. But like for a film, well, at the same time I'm speaking and then I'm like, no, I feel like it could work if you just have little intersperses of like a documentary that was in the universe of the film that you were in, or like an address, a public address, or a bit of a news bulletin, which I guess is already a thing that's quite common. So yeah, I guess it can work in most formats. I think it works well in a way that's different in books because it's also like a little, not a checkpoint, but it just sort of keeps things fresh.
Yeah. And because books are usually written in like that close third or first person perspective, it gives you knowledge that the main character wouldn't necessarily have, but you as the reader might need to understand the nuance of a situation, rather than going, how do I figure out how my main character would know this? You go, here's this academia who's dedicated their whole life to this one specific fact, who's just going to come and tell you about it.
Yeah, and here what you mostly get is information from the point of view of people who have left, which I think is important because you don't want to hear from them in perspective, because you want this sort of almost claustrophobic feeling of like we're trapped on Earth and these are the only people who are around and whatever's going on upstairs is somewhat of a mystery. But at the same time, we need to give you a little bit of what's going on so that you have the groundwork so that when it comes in later, it doesn't feel like it's all a bombardment of new information that's coming out of nowhere.
It does feel like it's doing dramatic irony really well, because you're like, you've got these like high brow academics in space going, oh, that place, yada, yada, yada. And then you're on Earth with Kay going, y'all are kind of just elitist and have clearly never thought about Earth in a realistic capacity. And it has that really nice juxtaposition of like, oh, obviously this. And you're like, it's not obvious actually, because it's not true. And I feel like that is also somewhat a commentary on academia being like removed and behind glass from the subject is actually discussing.
Yeah.
And not treating the stuff it discusses as like real human beings and stuff like that. Now that I'm getting further on in my academia career, it's very interesting to me to see these things and be like, yep, that's accurate.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, especially with the climate of like a lot of dark academia novels and light academia novels, but a lot of like university settings and school settings, to have the opposite of that, to put the academics behind the glass and have us only learn about them through their paper, and to actually learn about the citizens of Earth from their own points of view is quite a nice reversal. Also, on a less thematic level, Curtis's prose is just so good. She just uses such good words for things. I remember at one point she uses scorched to describe a cough, and I'm like, that's so lovely. I mean, it's not, it's gross, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
I think Siwa is described as, it sounds like he has holes in his throat when he speaks. I'm like, That's such an interesting way to say that. I love it.
Oh, this bit just made me go insane from like a gay point of view. When we get the flashback chapters between Noel and Kay, which are gorgeous, and I love them. But when she says she didn't know how to be happy, but she was learning, it was like a kind of poison she had to immunize herself against bit by bit to keep it from being rejected out of hand. That just got me.
I love it when gay people exist.
I love it when people are homosexual.
And now they're being homosexual in space.
In space. Well, I guess they're being homosexual on Earth now.
Now they are, yeah.
Gay people real on Earth.
What? I thought they were a myth invented by big space. Oh my god, also the description from the boy's point of view in Saint's Cradle where he's talking about people being filled with void.
Yes, I remember that. Oh, and then you get that line as well of what the preacher says, which is that you'll cut them open and they would only bleed void.
Oh, that was so cool.
That was so cool. I loved that. And I love that reframing. I said already with the heaven-hell thing, but just like the darkness of Earth being this comforting, warm, embracing thing, and the darkness of space being this cold, uncaring thing. Oof.
Grace Curtis.
Applause.
I like how short this book is as well.
Yes.
Comes in, says what it's got to say, and it leaves. It's nice and succinct.
It's a good length. Floating Hotel was also very short, and I'm happy with this trend. I'm like, just give us more of these like very well-formed, I'm assuming very tightly edited books. Like it feels like a lot of care was taken to make it flow nicely.
And we were talking recently about this issue with editing books that seems to be floating around in the industry at the moment.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof, specifically. Whereas this gives me hope again.
Yes, yeah. That something can be paced perfectly. Because the pacing in this, at no point was I bored. Even though it has a sort of a slow steadiness to it. Like it doesn't feel fast. I think it just canters you along.
I don't understand how people can't like this book. Like, everybody has their taste, whatever, but they are wrong.
Yeah.
With something like Gideon, I can understand why people don't like it, because it is a very sort of, like, specific book, and it's very sort of, like, inaccessible in some times because it is so dense and rich.
Yeah.
This book is just good.
Yeah.
Like, it's accessible, it's easy to read, it's interesting, it's fun, it's deep.
Yeah, I think Floating Hotel got the Wes Anderson comparison a lot, and I can kind of see it for this as well, in terms of you get a lot of these, like, I don't want to say the word quirky, idiosyncratic characters, but then everything is revolving around this central theme, despite this sort of surreal storyline and surreal setting. Like it's very much grounded in like a human universal theme. I would say that it definitely keeps coming back to loss here, in terms of almost everyone's just experienced some kind of loss, even if you don't get like the details of it. Like when you get Ava, who's talking about not being able to get the comic and find out how this character died, you can tell that circles back to some kind of real loss, but you never actually find out the details of what that is.
Loved that.
That was getting me. I also loved her just info dumping about the comic and Kate just being like, okay, what are you talking
I
about?
love in-universe texts, and then this being like the hyper obsessive vibe.
I too would risk my life in an apocalypse to get like a special edition of a book or a specific edition of a series that I didn't have. So I can completely empathize. I get that it's a little bit like esoteric, but I'm still baffled. I just love it. I guess for some people, maybe if you have a real issue with violence on the page, Curtis writes violence in a very, I wouldn't say it's gory. It's definitely not. It doesn't have that Gideon problem where there's a lot of details, but like, it can be quite shocking.
Yeah,
which I think is really good. And I think that comes back to her being a very empathetic writer, that she can give you that sense of horror without giving you details. Like the moment where Seawall murders the small town sheriff towards the beginning, and then his bodyguard dude comes in. You don't really get the details of what happened there, but it's still pretty horrible. Hattie dying is really horrible. Something similar happens in Floating Hotel, which lives in my brain rent-free now. So if you're listening, if you know, you know.
Maybe I'll take it on holiday with me.
Yeah, it's just one sentence, and yet I still remain disturbed. So, you know, but I think that's a strength, and I think it's the kind of thing that for me works well in fiction, because it doesn't devalue violence. It doesn't undermine it. It doesn't downplay it.
Which I think does fit into the theme of
Exactly.
Kay being so like sort of like trying to pull away from that, especially in the current climate of writing about horror and violence, where it is sort of like, and then he killed 10 men for me and it was really sexy, which I'm not downplaying. I enjoy a fair amount of it.
There's a time and a place, you know?
There's a time and a place, and I would love to see more of actually violence is horrifying.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we are very flooded at the moment with a desensitization of violence. So it's possibly even more shocking when you see it actually played straight, because we're so used to that desensitized aesthetic.
Yeah. I think it would undermine the themes of this book as well if it was desensitized to violence, if it just included it for shock value or for the sake of it. I think it's important in this book, and then I think Curtis struck that balance very, very well.
So, Soren, as the new reader, tell me your final thoughts.
I absolutely adored this. Curtis has become an absolute insta-buy for me. I kind of thought she already was, even just with Floating Hotel alone, but this has obviously solidified that. She's not a one-trick pony. She has a style, she has a vibe. I'm curious to see if it's something that she takes forward into her fiction, or if she breaks the mold a bit, but I do not care either way, because I just love her writing, I love her prose. I love the way that she explores themes, and I love the themes that she chooses to touch on. This was incredible. Thank you for recommending it. What about you?
Yeah, rereading it was a lot of fun because it's been a while since I read it, because I read it when we were first sort of starting out this podcast.
Yeah, I remember. And it was one of the ones that you said like immediately, like, let's do this. And it's just taken us a really long time to get to it.
But it was just really interesting to revisit and be like, yeah, this holds up. This is a solid book. Like it just came out in paperback when we were recording. And the moment it came out, I was like, I need 3 copies, please. I have a lot of friends who I've already given them Gideon. So I'm like, what can I do next? And I'm like, you know what I think you guys would like? So I was like, this is a present for finishing your disc. This is a present just because you had a good day. I'm just like, take the book. Read it, please. It's short. You'll love it. And now that I know the Wes Anderson comparison, I have a friend who is very into Wes Anderson. I have not consumed a Wes Anderson movie ever.
There you go.
And I'm like, hello, it was your birthday 4 months ago. Would you like a book? No notes, vibes, loved it. I really want to see what Grace Curtis does next.
Do you have any recommendations for anyone who also loved Frontier?
Okay, yes. So a few years ago, like 7 authors did this thing for Amazon where they wrote short stories and released, and they are free on Kindle and Prime. Obviously, we don't have Amazon, but I read all 7 in order because Tamsyn Muir wrote one, and I was like, I'm going to read all of them. Almost all of them were awful. Politely, lovingly, almost all of them either should have been full novels or didn't really get to their own point. So
the opposite of this could have been an email. This shouldn't have been an email. This should have been a meeting.
Yeah, but Tamsyn Muir's one, on the one hand, probably should have been a full-on dissertation, but that's mainly just because I love her writing. But it is a space western dystopia with a gunslinger and like shape-shifting aliens and zombies, and I can just keep adding more and more things, and it's got them all. And it's very classically Tamsyn Muir obscure, but it's also sapphic space western vibes. I read them around the same time, so my brain is sort of locked on.
I did not read them around the same time and co-signed similar vibe. Something also about the theme of identity and violence and how those two things interlock.
And sapphic vibes.
And sapphic vibes, of course. And people trying to scratch out a weird living in the apocalypse.
Yeah, the vibes. Second recommendation. Can I recommend Becky Chambers? I feel like everybody on this podcast probably already read Becky Chambers.
I mean, if you haven't read Becky Chambers, listener, please.
Yeah.
Please.
It's the OG queer sci-fi, soft, not action-driven sci-fi.
Character-driven sci-fi, space opera.
I got the book group at work to read it a couple of years ago, and they're all like in their 70s and have never touched a sci-fi book in their lives. And they all like didn't think they were going to like it. And then they're like, it felt like just a normal book, but set in space. And like, that is my favorite thing. It's like just sort of like very slice of life, normal quote unquote books set in fantasy or sci-fi genre. You know, it's what I write, it's what I read, it's what I love. And I feel like Becky Chambers is the epitome of that. What about you?
Obviously, I've been talking about it loads, but if you haven't read Floating Hotel, it's just come out, I'm pretty sure. Absolutely worth reading. So good. There's an overarching mystery, and it is good fun. If you liked this, you will definitely like that. That's like the most easy recommendation to make, basically. And then I have another one, which I haven't quite finished yet, but I'm going to make it anyway. It's Early Riseborough by Jasper Ford, which has a different feel, but I think has the same thing of like a very wild and wacky world building concept being treated very seriously that makes it really fun. It does have a central character who you're following, but there are a lot of characters coming in, so it kind of has that same, in inverted commas, space opera sort of feel. This isn't a space opera. This is arguably science fiction. It's set in a world where everybody hibernates every year. And then the main character ends up becoming a winter consul, which is basically somebody that stays awake and has to deal with all of the horrors that entail with being awake during the winter when basically everyone is asleep and other people are taking advantage of that to commit crimes, etc. And is it sapphic? That depends on how you feel personally, because the protagonist doesn't have a gender. Their name is Charlie, and they don't confirm one way or another. Like, nobody ever acknowledges their gender, basically. So maybe they're non-binary. Maybe they're a woman. Maybe they're a man. So I guess it can be sapphic if you want it to be.
Incredible.
If you just decide it's sapphic, then it is.
Mhm.
Sapphic-ness is in the eye of the beholder. Charlie is attracted to women, so...
Oh, this looks incredible.
It's fun. I'm having a really good time. There's sort of like a similarly like humorous writing style, but then moments of like pure horror in there, which feels similar. There's definitely a very similar feel going on.
Incredible vibes. Incredible. So
we are breaking away from the monthly release format for a little while, and going back to a fortnightly thing just for this month. And we're taking a break as well from Sapphics in Space to talk about Evocation by S.T. Gibson with S.T. Gibson. So that is a urban fantasy novel about a young man with a mysterious curse who has to rely on his ex and his ex's new wife to try and save himself from the magical consequences of that curse.
Until then, you're always welcome through the bookcase.
Don't forget to scratch the cat on your way out. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Bookcase, a production of Plain Our Prod. On this episode, you heard Morgan Greensmith and Soren Broward discussing Frontier by Grace Curtis. You can follow Grace Curtis on Twitter at @KrakenerWrites. You can find The Hidden Bookcase on Twitter at Hidden Bookcase and on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, and TikTok at Hidden Bookcase Podcast. Find out more about Plain Our Prod at plainourprod.com. Know what we should read next, or want to chat to us about what you thought of this episode's read? You can reach us at thehiddenbookcase@gmail.com. Send us a DM on social media, or come chat with your fellow bookworms in our growing Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Want to support The Hidden Bookcase? Support us on Patreon for bonus episodes, audio outtakes, playlists, and other extras. Buy a book through our bookshop.org page, or consider leaving us a rating or review or telling a friend how to find us. Your whispers are the best way for bookworms to discover our show. For our next episode, we have something special planned, an interview with S.T. Gibson about her upcoming release, Evocation, the first book in the Summoner's Circle. You can join us for that in just 2 weeks' time on June 17th. We hope to see you then, and in the meantime, you're always welcome through the bookcase.